It was the kind of story that seemed straight out of a thriller. Rich, powerful, and surrounded by secrets. But this one was real. In the heart of Silicon Valley, where tech billionaires call the shots, and innovation is their weapon of choice. One man's rise was anything but ordinary. Ethan Mercer, son of the tech mogul and self-made billionaire, had always been in the public eye. On the surface, he had it all. Access to the best education, unlimited resources, and a legacy that promised to change the world. But the truth behind Ethan's rise to power was something far darker than anyone could have imagined. As the heir to a massive tech empire, Ethan had been groomed for greatness from a young age. His father, Richard Mercer, had built a revolutionary tech company that was transforming industries. Everyone thought Ethan would follow in his father's footsteps and take the company to new heights. But Ethan was different. His brilliance wasn't in the innovations he created. It was in how he manipulated the very systems that were meant to help society. He used technology to control, to exploit, and to deceive, all while maintaining the facade of a visionary. He became a symbol of everything that was wrong with tech in the modern age. A man who used his skills for personal gain, pushing the boundaries of ethics and law. But what Ethan didn't expect was that one person, a journalist with no fear, would begin to dig deeper into his empire. Sarah Johnson was just another reporter at a small tech news outlet, trying to make her name in a sea of big players. But she wasn't like the others. While the world around her was obsessed with the shiny surface of new technologies, Sarah had a different approach. She understood that the truth wasn't always what it seemed, and she wasn't afraid to ask the tough questions. It started with a simple tip, one she almost dismissed. Someone who worked in the shadows of Mercer's tech empire reached out, hinting at something far more sinister than anyone knew. At first, Sarah thought it might be a wild conspiracy, another exaggerated story to catch her attention. But as she followed the trail, piece by piece, the puzzle began to take shape. The more she uncovered, the clearer it became that Ethan Mercer was playing a dangerous game with the technology his father had built. It wasn't just business. It was manipulation at the highest level. Ethan's company had a secret project, one that no one outside of the inner circle knew about. A project that could change the world, but not in a way anyone would expect. It was an advanced form of artificial intelligence, capable of not only collecting data, but also using it to predict and control human behavior. From social media patterns to voting trends, this AI had the potential to sway the decisions of millions, and Ethan had the power to wield it however he saw fit. As Sarah dug deeper into the project, she found herself at the edge of a moral abyss. She had uncovered something that could ruin the Mercer family empire and expose the ugly truth behind its success. But there was a catch. The deeper she got, the more dangerous it became. Ethan was ruthless, and with his resources, he had the power to silence anyone who got in his way, even Sarah. But Sarah wasn't the kind of person to back down. Armed with only her determination and a few loyal contacts, she knew she had to take this story to the world. The world needed to know what Ethan was doing. She had to expose the man who had been playing God with technology and bring him to justice. But how could one journalist, with so few allies, take on a tech billionaire and his empire? It seemed impossible, but Sarah had one advantage. She knew how to use the very tools Ethan had created against him. What happened next would shock everyone. No one could have predicted the lengths to which Sarah would go to expose the truth. The battle between tech and truth was about to escalate, and it would have far-reaching consequences for both Ethan and Sarah. But could she really bring a billionaire down with nothing more than her courage and her pen? Or would Ethan's power be too much for anyone to challenge? The story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The question remained, who would emerge victorious in the battle of technology versus integrity? And would anyone truly survive once the truth came out? What Sarah did next would leave everyone speechless and set the stage for a war that no one could have seen coming. Stay tuned. The next chapter of this story is about to unfold as Sarah sat in her cramped apartment, staring at the pile of notes, documents, and emails strewn across her desk. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was in over her head. The more she uncovered, the more the stakes grew. Ethan Mercer wasn't just some tech mogul with an expensive suit and a fancy car. He was a puppet master, pulling the strings of not only his empire, but the world around him. And the AI project, codenamed Project Eclipse, was his greatest weapon. For weeks, Sarah had been tracing the origins of Project Eclipse, and what she'd found was more disturbing than she could have imagined. It wasn't just a tool for predicting consumer behavior, like some had thought. It was far more dangerous, a neural network that could infiltrate social networks, manipulate public opinion, and subtly influence key decisions in real time. It wasn't some abstract technology. It was a live entity, one that learned, evolved, and adapted with every interaction, and Ethan knew exactly how to exploit it. The more Sarah learned about Project Eclipse, the more she realized it wasn't just an act of corporate greed. Ethan wasn't just building a tool to make his company richer. He was building a tool to reshape the world in his image. His ultimate goal was nothing short of control. He wanted to control the global narrative, shape how people thought, and steer the choices they made. If he succeeded, he could turn every digital platform into a playground for his influence, quietly manipulating elections, shaping policies, and dictating what millions of people saw, read, and believed. Sarah had been careful. She'd worked with trusted sources, interviewed former employees who'd fled from the company, and even managed to secure an anonymous leak of internal documents. But every time she thought she was getting closer to a breakthrough, she was met with an obstacle. A subtle yet unsettling force was pushing back at every turn. Locked accounts, hacked emails, and surveillance cameras mysteriously turning off during her interviews. Ethan Mercer's reach was everywhere, and it seemed as though he was always one step ahead of her. At one point, Sarah had even noticed a strange pattern. A few of the people who'd helped her along the way suddenly disappeared. Some had moved out of the country, others had stopped responding to her calls. It was as if they were all being systematically erased from her story. But she refused to stop. This was bigger than her career. It was bigger than Ethan. This was about revealing the truth, no matter the cost. But the more she dug, the more personal it became. One evening, as Sarah walked home from work, she noticed something strange, a sleek black car slowly pulling up beside her. She felt a chill crawl up her spine. The tinted windows rolled down, and a voice she didn't recognize spoke. Through the speaker, Sarah Johnson. The voice asked, cold and calculated. She hesitated. The last time she'd been approached by someone in this way, it hadn't ended well. "Who's asking?" she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. There was a long pause before the voice spoke again, now more forceful. "Consider this a warning. You're digging in places you don't belong. We can make this all go away. Stop your investigation, and we'll forget you ever started. Keep going, and you won't like what happens." Next, the car sped off before Sarah could respond. Her heart pounded, and a lump formed in her throat. It was clear. Ethan had made his move. He was playing dirty now, and Sarah had no doubt he had the resources to silence her completely. But in that moment, something inside her hardened. Fear would not be her final emotion. She had come too far to back out now. She was on the verge of exposing one of the most dangerous figures in the tech world, and she would not let intimidation stand in her way. But Ethan wasn't done with her yet. As Sarah continued to gather more pieces of the puzzle, she discovered something unexpected. A former employee, one of the original architects behind Project Eclipse, reached out to her in secret. He was terrified, broken, and desperate. He told Sarah that Ethan had planned for years to use the AI to create a digital dictatorship, and that he had already started testing its influence on smaller, less significant targets. What he wanted to do next was far more ambitious. He intended to launch Project Eclipse on a global scale, starting with a test run during the upcoming presidential election. If Ethan could manipulate voter behavior in one country, he would have proven that his technology could alter the course of history itself. This was bigger than just Ethan's thirst for power. It was about the future of free will, the freedom of choice, and the very nature of truth itself. If Ethan succeeded, the world would no longer have the same freedoms it once did. People would be pawns in a game they never even knew was being played. But Sarah wasn't alone in this anymore. As she shared her findings with a trusted network of journalists, activists, and technologists, a quiet revolution began to build around her. The more people she spoke to, the more they understood that the stakes were higher than ever before. Ethan Mercer, a tech billionaire with an almost limitless reach, was about to make his move on the world stage, and only a handful of people knew what was coming. The tension was building. Sarah was closer than ever to bringing down Project Eclipse, but the closer she got, the more dangerous it became. She wasn't just battling a tech mogul anymore. She was up against a system that had the power to change the world, and no one, not even Sarah, could fully predict how it would end. As Sarah prepared to release her findings, she received an anonymous email with an attachment. When she opened it, her blood ran cold. It was a video, footage of her apartment, filmed from a hidden camera in her own home. Ethan Mercer wasn't just watching her. He was waiting. The climax was coming, and Sarah had no idea if she would survive the storm she was about to unleash. But one thing was certain. This battle would change everything, and the world would never be the same. Sarah's breath caught as she watched the video on her screen. There it was, her own apartment, captured by the lens of a camera she hadn't noticed. Ethan Mercer had been watching her all along. He wasn't just threatening her, he was closing in. This wasn't a game anymore. It was personal. The email was clear. If she went public with the information she had, if she exposed Project Eclipse, her life would be ruined. There would be no escape, but Sarah had already made her choice. She had nothing left to lose. She couldn't walk away now, not after everything she had uncovered, not after seeing what Ethan was capable of. But as she prepared to release her findings to the world, the unthinkable happened. Her computer screen froze. The words on the screen, her expose, her evidence, disappeared, wiped clean before her eyes. Panic surged through her. She tried everything to recover the file, but it was gone. Every trace, every document she had painstakingly collected over the past few months vanished as if it had never existed. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Ethan Mercer had somehow gotten to her first. He had anticipated her every move. The AI that he had built wasn't just about manipulating data. It was capable of manipulating people, controlling information, and wiping out anything that threatened his empire. It had gotten inside her network, and now she was facing the impossible. Just when Sarah thought it was all over, a call came in. It was from an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A voice, calm and collected, spoke from the other end. "It's not over, Sarah. You don't need to expose Project Eclipse. I've already done it for you." The voice belonged to someone she recognized. Amir, the former employee who had once helped her, but had gone into hiding. Amir wasn't just a whistleblower anymore. He had been working from the inside, coordinating with an underground group of activists and technologists who had been tracking Ethan's every move. Amir had managed to retrieve the missing files Sarah thought were gone. The group had already made copies of the evidence and hidden them in several secure locations, accessible only to trusted individuals. The truth about Project Eclipse would reach the world, one way or another. Sarah's heart raced as she realized the scope of what Amir had done. He had taken a huge risk, one that would certainly put him in Ethan's crosshairs. But by releasing the files through the underground network, they could ensure that Ethan's plans for global manipulation would be exposed, no matter how hard he tried to cover his tracks. But it wasn't over. Ethan wasn't going to just let Sarah walk away, not when she had the power to destroy everything he'd worked for. The days that followed were filled with tension. Every time Sarah left her apartment, she felt like someone was watching her. Every email, every text, felt like it could be a trap. Ethan was relentless, and he would stop at nothing to preserve his empire. Then, as the clock ticked down, the story broke. Sarah's exposé, with the help of Amir's underground network, was released to the public. It was a global bombshell. News outlets, tech analysts, and social media platforms exploded with the revelation that one of the world's most influential billionaires had been manipulating global events for years through a powerful AI system. The tech industry was shaken to its core, and for the first time, people began to question everything about the digital world they lived in. Was anything real anymore? Or had it all been engineered? Ethan Mercer's empire began to crumble almost overnight. Investors pulled out. Governments began investigating his companies. Lawsuits piled up, and public backlash turned his once thriving businesses into liabilities. His carefully constructed illusion of control was shattered, and yet he remained silent, almost as though he were waiting for the storm to pass. But Sarah didn't stop there. With the evidence now in the hands of the world, she dug deeper. She uncovered the final piece of the puzzle, a secret meeting between Ethan and some of the world's most powerful leaders, people who had been complicit in his plans, turning a blind eye for their own benefit. Sarah's reporting exposed these alliances and the world's trust in its leaders, its tech giants, and its institutions was forever damaged. In the final twist, as Ethan was preparing for his legal battles, a series of cryptic messages began to surface. They were from Amir, who had gone dark after the story broke. It seemed that not all of Ethan's plans had been unraveled. Some parts of Project Eclipse were still in motion, and there were whispers of even darker things lurking beneath the surface. But that was a story for another day. For now, Sarah could finally breathe. She had brought the truth to light, despite the dangers, despite the threats. Ethan Mercer's empire had been exposed for what it truly was, a system built on manipulation, lies, and the illusion of control. But in the end, it was Sarah's courage and the help of those who stood with her that had brought it all crashing down. And as the world processed the truth, one thing became clear. The battle for control over technology wasn't just about power anymore. It was about something much deeper. It was about freedom. The freedom to think, to choose, and to trust in a world that had become increasingly difficult to understand. Sarah's story was one of defiance against a system that tried to dictate the narrative. But more importantly, it was a reminder that, even in the darkest moments, there are always those willing to fight for the truth.